Loo line is now running between Stonebridge Park and Harrow and Wealdstone, but with severe delays. Great Northern trains still can't stop southbound at both Hadley Wood and New Barnet stations because the overnight engineering works are still taking place. On the roads in Shooters Hill, on the Shooters Hill Road, there are delays in both directions, and that's because of an accident. Very busy in Stratford because Waddington roads had to be closed in both directions, and that's after a fire in a building.
This is LBC. Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973. LBC. TFL. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 10 minutes before 8 is the time now, without question, save for that extraordinary interview, the other side of the Atlantic, the fact that our children are going back to school in England. To ease our way through and get back to whatever normal life would be leading the news agenda. But let's return to that. Good news, although I'm sure there's a little heartache. For some of you, it would have been the most extraordinary time. You'll have had, I don't know, about 3 months with your sons and daughters around the kitchen table in their bedrooms. So there's a sudden wrench, I would imagine, for some. But, of course, it is in their interest to get them back to school. And joining us to discuss that is Children's Minister and Conservative MP Vicky Ford. And I note, Minister, good morning, there's a possibility now that you'll look at how the school year runs, according to your Education Secretary, effectively your boss, Gavin Williamson. Have you any more detail on that, Minister? Good morning.
Good morning. So can I just start by saying what a hugely exciting day this is for children and their families and teachers across the country, and indeed for the whole country as we take this first and really important step in the lockdown. I mean, the most important thing, Nick, is to get children and young people back into their schools and colleges. It's so important for their mental health and well-being as well as their education. We know they've missed seeing friends. We know they've missed that joy of learning. So that's, of course, the most important step. And then we have appointed Sir Kevin Collins, who's hugely experienced in this area, to look at what extra support we'll need to put in the years ahead.
Yes. I did ask how the school year runs. Are we possibly looking at longer terms, shorter holidays, longer days? What might be on the agenda, Minister?
So right now it's just getting children and young people back into that sort of as near normal as possible education that they're all used to. And then we've asked Sir Kevin to look at all options for the years ahead, and I'm not going to prejudge what his considerations are there.
So they could be longer days and shorter holidays.
We're looking at all sorts of options, but we've also already announced a massive package. We started working on how to give more support to children if they have missed out on some of their education. We started working on that right from the beginning of the pandemic. We announced an extra £1 billion of school funding back last June and another 700 million just a couple of weeks ago. And that can be used for all sorts of projects, for one-on-one tutoring for some who may need it. It can be used, the schools have flexibility if they want to run a summer school, especially, for example, for children who are moving from primary into secondary school. So some schools are considering that. They can use it for well-being, for activities as well. So there's a huge amount of flexibility there for schools to help their young people right now. For those that need it, not everyone will need it.
Right.
I mean, many children and young people have been doing amazing work from home, and really huge thanks to their parents and carers and school staff who've been supporting them as well.
What should a school do if a pupil refuses to take one of the flow tests?
So, well, first of all, the flow tests, they're not mandatory, but we are really strongly encouraging them just for secondary school pupils. And what I've found when I've been talking to teenagers and young people is they're very, very keen to be back at school. They want it to be safe. They want to keep themselves safe, their friends safe, their family safe, the school staff as well. And that's why I think the vast majority of them will take these tests. I spoke to one of my own headmasters last week. Over 90% of the families have agreed that they will take the test.
Yes.
So I think we will see that build up.
Yeah, my question is, what should a school do if a pupil refuses?
Well, it's not mandatory, and we know that some young people will be very anxious about taking these tests. Just to reassure them, the Deputy Director of Public Health England was yesterday explaining that the chances of getting a false positive test are less than 1 in 1,000. So I hope that gives them some reassurance. But we can't force them if people are anxious or nervous about it. That's their choice. But the medical advice is to please do take these tests. So I hope that parents listening to that will sign up their child if they're under 16 for the test, because the medical advice is please do this. It's a way to keep us all safe.
And regards the wearing of masks for primary and secondary school children, not just to and from, not just to and from school, but when they're on sites. What's the government advice on that, Minister?
So primary school children should not be wearing a mask. They don't need to wear a mask. For secondary school pupils, again, we've taken medical advice on this, and they're advising and really strongly recommending that for secondary school pupils, if they're in the classroom and they can't social distance, then please do wear a mask. We're going to review that again at Easter time, but right at the moment, that is the medical advice.
And are you concerned, what of the union suggesting that parents are telling parents schools could close if not enough pupils wear face masks? How real a possibility might that be, Minister?
So we absolutely want to make this irreversible. We want to do it cautious. It's a really key step in removing the lockdown, and that's so important for the whole of society. So we really have put in these extra measures to keep COVID out of the classroom. That's on top of all the measures that were in schools already. We're encouraging people, please do sign your child up for the tests, encourage them to wear the mask. That will help to keep them all safer. We don't want to go back to a situation where all schools are closed. This has got to be an irreversible journey out of lockdown. And Nick, I think it's also very important to remember that we're in a different place to where we were in January. We've got the amazing vaccine program. That means that 1 in 3 adults are now vaccinated. And that does give all of society that bit of extra protection. But for the rest of us, we need to recognise that opening schools is a big step in relaxing the lockdown. And the rest of us need to be extremely cautious that we still keep following the rules in order to enable this first step to go well, and then us to move on to the next steps of the roadmap.
I'm afraid I don't know your personal circumstances. Are you a mother yourself? Have you had to ready children to go back to school? Have you been battling with lessons over the dining table?
So mine are actually all a bit older now. I've got 2 students at home.
So it wasn't so bad. OK, just coming to a final couple of matters. The front page of one of the newspapers, the Prime Minister hinting possibly that the 1% pay rise for NHS staff, which caused a degree of controversy, is not set in stone. Many would say this is after a weekend of rather negative headlines. Do you have any latest information on that, Minister?
So, I think it's an incredibly difficult situation. I'm married to an NHS doctor myself, so I know how hard all of those in our NHS have been working throughout. And of course, we want to make sure that everybody who works in public services gets a really good pay. But we also need to set this against, the many hundreds of thousands of people who've lost jobs during the pandemic. I think it's 700,000 people who also need support. And obviously, we're putting in that support to help people. We've got, this huge debt that, quite rightly, the government spent a lot of money on supporting jobs and livelihoods, but we've got the biggest national debt since the Second World War. So we'll need to be mindful of all of those decisions. And when it comes to public sector pay, of course, we want to make sure that those on the lowest incomes get the best pay rises.
Yes, I mean, I wonder if your husband had a reaction to the 1% pay rise when it came through last week, Minister. How would he be spending that vast sum of money?
So absolutely. So I'm never going to speak for my other half, but
okay.
I mean, I think we do need to remember that, for example, newly qualified nurses have had a 12% pay rise. We'll obviously put in a pay rise for those on the very lowest levels of public sector pay. And I'm sure that the Chancellor continues to think about these issues.
All right, just lastly, as a mother, speaking as a mother, does your heart go out to the Queen this morning, watching her family riven with these headlines and this interview?
I think my heart goes out to every family. And Nick, I wasn't up at 1 o'clock in the morning listening to this interview. I was getting ready for the announcements on getting children back to school and thinking of all.
You're not aware of what's been said, Minister?
I am aware of what's been said, and I'm not going to comment in detail because I didn't see it. But I'd just like to just say again what I say every time: there's no room for racism in our society. And we need to always work together to make sure that we stop it. OK, you think that Meghan's got a bombshell claim there. I'm grateful for your time. Thank you indeed. Children's Minister Conservative MP Vicky Ford appearing here on LBC. Our conversation will continue. When we come back to that interview I've just referenced with the Minister, do you remember this from May? Golly, it's almost 3 years ago.
In the presence of God and before this congregation, Harry and Meghan have given their consent and made their marriage vows to each other.
No, they haven't. They'd actually done it 3 days prior, Archbishop. So why were you part of that extraordinary sham? Yes, we return to that interview. We're also, of course, go back to school, the idea of longer school days and shorter holidays. The Minister not confirming, but it appears everything is on the table. We'll give you more time and reaction to that after the 8 o'clock news on LBC.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, The Duchess of Sussex has revealed there were concerns in the royal family about her son Archie's skin colour before he was born. Meghan and Harry's interview with Oprah Winfrey has aired in America overnight. During the 2-hour programme, the Duchess refused to say who in the family had raised the conversations.
About how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
Ooh. And you're not going to tell me who had the conversation?
I think that would be very damaging to them.
Meghan also revealed she felt suicidal during her time as a working royal. She said she requested help but was told it wouldn't look good for the institution. Prince Harry said he felt unsupported by his father, the Prince of Wales, who he said stopped taking his calls about wanting to step back.
I feel really let down because he's been through something similar. He knows what